past few years, and it's become more focused on the actual student learning and less on the delivery or just the content itself. A well-designed and delivered course engages students and provides quality learning experience. This change has led to a change in how that instruction takes place. It has changed from a teacher-centered learning environment to a student-centered learning environment. And we'll look at both of those. Let's talk a little bit about teacher-centered learning. And you have another short video this week. I think it's only about 5 minutes long. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail here. The teacher-centered learning is when your teacher is giving a lecture and there's nothing for you to do except to passively listen. There's no discussions to follow up with or assignments to do. It's simply a one-way transfer of information. Now you might be thinking, well, the students could get information from other places besides the teacher. That might come from the textbook. In the days when teacher-centered instruction was really going along strong, and you'll see that in that other video I have for you, the teacher usually decided on the textbook, and the textbook mirrored what the teacher was saying in the lecture. So as you can see, teacher-centered was a one-way, one idea on a topic. There was no way for the student to gather other information. It was all teacher-centered. Student-centered instruction is not new. In fact, it came about in the mid-1900s with a researcher named John Dewey. We have a short video on John Dewey's information this week. But John Dewey advocated the personal experience of the learner in the learning experience. Dr. Dewey wanted students to have student collaboration and a way for students to learn from each other. John Dewey's work looked mainly at junior high and high school students, and you'll see that in that very short video. But soon after John Dewey became quite famous for his thoughts about student-centered learning, another man named Knowles came about with some research on the adult learner. And Knowles said that the adult learner wants to be a self-directed learner. They want to receive information on the topic from a wide variety of sources. They want to collaborate, but they want to be in charge of the learning path that they are taking. Knowles said that the adult learner wants to have many different learning styles that they can access, and they want a wide variety of input. They don't want their learning to come from one source, the teacher. Let me give you a little bit more of a history lesson on distance education. Many years ago, when distance education was really getting started, much of the education was delivered either by a lecture on television or even sometimes on the radio. It was totally teacher-centered. The students listened, they did an assignment, they took a test. The students listened the next week, they did an assignment, they took a test. And after a few years, the instructors were starting to see large dropout rates, and they were saying that there needed to be some changes. And that's when distance education became much more interactive. The technology was changing about that same time, and it allowed instructors to do lectures like this, but it also allowed students to get involved. And in that way, the retention rates and the growth of distance education began to change. The online classroom was being facilitated by not only the instructor, but also by the students who are in the class. The newer online classes promoted active learning, collaboration, mastery of material, and student control over the learning path. When we started to move to a more student-centered online learning, there were still lectures that were often given by the instructor, but the instructor would then step aside and start to ask questions and try to engage the student to make sure that they were understanding the new knowledge. The most important part was that the instructor was coaching the student to understand how this new knowledge might fit into their real-world experiences. Students learn by collaborating with each other. Each one of the students comes to the class with some experience or some knowledge on that particular topic, and they're able to share that information. The teacher's role as the coach or as the mentor is to make sure that that knowledge being shared or collaborated on is done correctly and it meets the learning outcomes. Suddenly, the student must be actively involved in their own learning process. No more just sitting back and listening or taking a few notes. Those customized materials that we just spoke about also lead to just-in-time learning, and this is really so important in student-centered instruction. The student now has customized material that is made just for them and specifically covers real-world application of this topic. The just-in-time learning also means that a student can access the information, access the lecture, access these handouts anytime, 24/7. It also allows them to go back and review anytime they need it. It really is student-centered and just in time. In student-centered learning, we see a move from textbooks to customized, personalized handouts and materials for the student. Again, I said that textbooks are still a good thing, but they're usually designed to match what the instructor is teaching in the lecture. So it's really just one philosophy on the topic. But by having customized handouts, as you have had in this class, you see not only my information, but a collaboration of many places from which I have drawn the information to share with you. So it's no longer just a one-way street. A student-centered course needs to be well organized, and this often takes more time on the part of the instructor. But the well organization of a course facilitates the learning. It makes it easier for the student. That's what facilitation is really about. It's enhancing the learning for the student and making it easier for them to understand it and to apply it to what they want, what their goals are. So in that organization of the class, we take small bits of information, chunking them is what it's called, and present those to the students in a sequential way. There's also a syllabus, there's learning outcomes, the assignment due dates are well spelled out, and the assignments are easy for students to understand. So facilitating a student-centered class is not always as easy as it may sound, but you'll learn more about that in the next lecture.